I have another question since you mentioned it, right? What was the origin of this tactic of using slaves to commit violent acts of discipline against other slaves, and what was the psychological effect on other slaves when they witnessed that?
I don't know the origin, right? But I know the effect is you can't trust your own people. You know what I'm saying? All right? Because if you have, we're all in this plantation together, and one person's being put above us to either make us do work or discipline us, whatever the case may be, it does create a system where you learn not to trust your own. In many ways, there's manifestations of that today. All right? If you work around a bunch of people, and there's one person who seems to be currying favor with the powers that be, that creates distrust. Not only the person who's currently in favor, but around other people, because you're like, who's the next one that's going to try to move up the line and get control over us? So that in the larger picture, it does create a lot of distrust within a community, and I think that is something that still manifests itself today in a lot of ways.
And it just seems that slave owners were great psychologists.
Great. And now, in fact, this is I think I quote this slave owner in the book, was Bennett Barrow.
Earlier on?
Yeah, somewhere. Either Bennett Barrow or Barrow Bennett. I have to look and see. But anyway, they will make rules how to run a good plantation. And one of the main things is interesting to make the point is that they wanted to make sure that the slave looked at the plantation as their home. That there's no other place a slave would rather be than the plantation. So this little area that we have, there's nothing outside this area that's better for you than the plantation, right? And so in one sense, that made the slave very reliant on the slave master shore, but also killed the will to escape and rebel too. And that's still something that we still manifestations of today in terms of how African Americans are treated in some environments. Whereas, there's nothing else better for you, right? What we've created for you here is it. There's no need to ever think about, can things be better for me? Now, a lot of people rebel against that, but there are some people who accept.
Many people fight.
That's what I'm saying. The job you have, either the church you may attend or some of the communities that you reside in, this has been set up for you to enjoy. Don't ever think about anything else. And that's a huge problem.
And historically, right, when we think about the harshness of slavery, the focus is always on violence, but not psychology. And I'm just so, it's just like...
It was psychology.
And I just think that the way it's presented, people present as if violence kept the slaves. It was more the psychology that kept the slaves.
No, the psychology was affected because the slave maintained himself more than the master maintained the slave. Their boundaries you never crossed. Because that psychology was so effective. And that's why I think for Elkins and some other historians, the parent-child relationship is what they use as a way to speak about the relationship between the slave master and the slave. Like a parent and a child. Like a child views his parent as his ultimate source for everything. Like how many children who are reared well at least. The child's not just going to leave home and run away. All right, because this is everything to me. All right, the parent supplies my needs, feeds me, clothes me, gives me love and care. Even if that love and care may be abusive at sometimes, children are still going to stay at home. It's just like the slave, right? Because of the care they believe they're receiving from the slave. Now, let me tell you, there's an interesting part of the story in Uncle Tom's Cabin where there's a wild slave named Scipio, right? Rebellious. He's the anti-Tom, right? Always trying to run away and rebellious and so forth, right? The slave masters, there's a group of slave masters that have a meeting about Scipio, how to tame him, get him calm. There's one slave master says he has the answer, right? He has the answer to fix Scipio. So to your point now, he takes Scipio. Now, most people would think that this slave master took Scipio and beat him every night and tortured him and starved him. That's not what he did. He says he took Scipio, put him in his bed, and cared for him. That's what he did. And then Scipio turned out to be... But this is the thing. This is the end of the story, though. Scipio ended up taking care of the plantation way better than the slave master ever would, just because of that. So to your point, it's not violence. No. Sometimes it's psychology. Make you think that I love you. Make you think that I really care for you. And you'll be better. He's taking care of the other slaves now. Taking care of this man's plantation better than the slave master ever would. So that's really, it's psychology, like you said. It's not violence. And they figured that out. It's not always beating. care for them a little bit, make them feel good, and they'll take care of stuff better than you will.
And it's so wild because it's what happens then happens right now.
Same thing. It hasn't changed. Same thing. And that's why, in a lot of ways, people always say, "Well, why are things haven't changed or gotten better?" Because a lot of us are cared for too well. That's a problem. Because people talk about racism and pain. No, we're cared for very well. It's like, I'm not trying to mess with. It's hard to do it. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of ways we keep the same way the plantation was maintained centuries ago, the same way these systems are maintained today. Not always violence is the care you got to watch out for, right? Not the police out here beating people or shooting people, or somebody at your job is doing you violence. No, how are they caring for you? That's a sign of how the plantation is being maintained. That's the scarier part, because we love being cared for. Violence is easy to see. The care is the problem.